We are back on MorningLine. Thanks for joining us. We're talking about, the natural disasters that occur. Most recently, of course, this flooding in Humphreys County. And our guest with us this morning is Hiba Baroud. She is an assistant professor of civil and environmental engineering at Vanderbilt. And it's folks like her and the folks that she's teaching that will look ahead to the future on how to maybe better prepare to build to prevent this type of thing. And I appreciate you joining us this morning, Professor.
Thank you so much for having me.
I always like to make sure that you can hear me still loud and clear when we do these Zoom interviews. We had Joe waiting through the break, and we're going to take a phone call from him first as we continue to discuss this. Joe, good morning. Hi, Joe.
Good morning, Nick, and your guests. There's no doubt that the weather patterns in the world is changing. I just would like to ask the professor, what does she think is causing this weather to go haywire with all the storms and floods and tsunamis and things that's happening? What is her take on what is causing this?
Okay, yeah, I mean, we know scientists have, debated it and put out the theories. I mean, we talk about global warming, and I think most people agree that there is climate change. If you do not believe in that, you're just clueless, okay? There is climate changing, okay? The question sometimes then it goes to and where the debate is how much of a factor do humans play? And I think more and more we're understanding that we play a large role in that. What's your thought?
We definitely do play a role in that because our activities are leading to these greenhouse gas emissions to increase. Then this is causing the temperature to increase, and as a result of that, there are many factors that lead to these disaster or natural hazards to become more intense. So, for example, when we think about hurricanes, these storm systems they draw their energy from warm ocean water. So the higher that temperature is, the stronger these storms are going to be. The warmer the temperature is, it's causing ice, for example, land ice in Greenland and so on, to melt, and this is going to add water to the world's ocean. So this results in sea level rise, which also leads to flooding. But that's not only. This is only one way these warmer temperatures are impacting the weather or the trend in these natural hazards. Even though we think about it, it's kind of a counterintuitive, right? Winters are going to become more extremes because when the atmosphere is warming, it traps the water vapor later and later into the year, and so that precipitation will lead to heavier snowfall when the temperatures do drop during the winter. And so we saw that, for example, with the record-breaking snowstorms that happened in Texas and knocked out the power for millions of homes. So it does manifest in various ways, but it all comes down to the fact that this increase in greenhouse gas emissions leading to this increase in temperature is the really major factor of why these natural hazards are becoming major disasters.
Okay, and we know that leaders and governments around the country are looking at it and hoping taking steps to ease back and maybe improve the conditions. But would you say it's safe to say, though, that moving forward, even if we can do some things to reduce that number, we're going to be dealing with more extreme weather, period, for the foreseeable future?
Absolutely. I mean, this is what we have to think about when we're planning for the future. We should not look at what happened in the past. It's important to look at the past and learn from the lessons, but we should not rely on previous or only historical data when it comes to extreme weather events, because when we are building our infrastructure, we expect it to last 50, 100 years. And so we want to think 50 years or 100 years from now what the weather is going to look like and then plan accordingly instead of only looking at what we've experienced in the past.
All right, let's talk about civil engineering. Let's talk about the building of communities and cities and what the role engineers play in this. And I just want you, Hiba, to give me your take. I know you have not been out to the flood zone. You haven't walked around. You've seen the coverage. You have a better idea, along with the rest of us, of how this happened now, with how much rain fell and how it came out of some of the different waterways there in the creeks in Waverly. So let's just say the city mayor were to say, you know, Hiba, I know you're over at Vanderbilt, you're an engineer, civil and environmental. What types of things, you know, and I know there may be more that you can't touch on without going out and seeing it firsthand, but what kinds of things can a smaller community like Waverly in Humphreys County do moving forward from something like this? And I want specifics, not just general, well, prepare for it. I want you to give me some specifics of what you think they can do moving forward now to keep this from happening again.
I think first and foremost, it's extremely important to reconsider warning systems and evacuation plans. I think this is, we can think about, and I can talk about a few examples about ways, you know, built infrastructure can be used to plan in the long term or mitigate in the long term flood impacts. But it's extremely important to, for the local agencies to rethink the early warning system and educate the communities on what to do in these cases, and think about evacuation plans, because like I said, in situations like this, it can be life-saving. In terms of thinking more long-term or community-wide plans, there are various flood mitigation strategies. Again, of course, it depends on the community. Like you said, I haven't been there myself, but there are ways to think about either elevating the structure or building flood walls or widening the channels in the creeks, or for example, thinking about ways to store water or divert it. So diverting water into wetlands or floodplains, or ways to think about ways to control the release of water and make sure that it goes outside of the residential area. So those are ways that can help prevent or reduce the impact of the flood. There are also green infrastructure strategies, so thinking about mimicking kind of the natural way of storing water, like green roofs or permeable pavement and so on. But I think all of these infrastructure strategies are important and great, but alone they cannot protect communities. And so that's why I said it's important to think about early warning systems, being able to predict with high accuracy the intensity of the events that are going to happen. And very important in this case, not just for reducing the impact, but also for recovering and restoration, is to have flood insurance. So those are some very important ways to do it. And all these kind of land use and infrastructure plans must also be combined with, maybe in some cases, we need to think about home buyout programs. So making sure that people are not living in these high-risk areas.
Is there such a thing as where you can put sensors into waterways? Is there something like that being done? What I mean by, for instance, you know, there were flash flood warnings going into, you know, Saturday morning, and still this water came through as the flood very early, waking people up, 5 a.m. along those lines. It was dark. They were caught off guard. 17, 15 inches of rain was more. I'm just wondering, when you talk about early warning systems, maybe you can explain to me how all of a sudden a rush of water to that magnitude comes. We usually see, oh, it gets over the banks and then the river crests and then you can see the water coming, you have time to get out of the way. But my understanding was this was like a wave of water that came all at once. It wasn't a gradual thing, and literally blew open the door of these apartments that were there close to this creek, that it built up and it was in the dark. Just how does something like that build and hit that quickly? And could you have sensors out there in the waterway electronically to somehow pick that up, that, you know, Public Works would monitor in situations like that?
That could be one way, but when I'm thinking about early warning systems, I'm thinking more ahead of time, ahead of the storm, being able to predict the intensity of the storm.
Yeah,
that's one part of it.
Well, yeah, but the problem with that is, I mean, everyone was predicting it, and this was an outlier. I mean, right now the technology is not there. If it was there, our news team would have been able to say, 17 inches of water is coming your way. Get your butt out of there. No one predicted that, and all of the stations in Nashville have the most high-tech equipment in the country for predicting this, and they all predicted flash flooding. But nothing like this. So, I mean, it's great that we can talk about early warning and all this. None of that stuff predicted what happened. And it's the best there. It's not like there was something there that we could have used. I mean, where do we go from that? I guess, are you saying we got to develop better ways? That's why I was suggesting sensors in the river.
Yeah, I mean, that could be one way, and maybe it's being tested. I'm not sure, but the concern with having sensors in the river is that it might be too late by that time. But when you get a detection of the level of the river or the creek, that could be very risky. So when I think the main part here is that being able to link the intensity of the storm with how much that community can take in. So what is the limit of that creek or the river, and how is it linked to the intensity of the storm? So being able to translate, when I'm saying predicting the intensity of the storm, understanding the weather parameters of that storm that is coming in, but translating that into the community, so how much that community can take in. So that's also a very important factor, is that it could be that this community is actually not able to withstand this. Well, now we know it's not able to withstand this amount of rain, but being able to anticipate that. So modeling various extreme weather events. So for example, what we do in our research, we try to think about really almost unimaginable scenarios, so really very, very intense weather events, and then test them out, see how the community will respond, or model how this a hazard of this intensity, what kind of impacts does it translate to? And I think that's the missing part of the equation here, is that we need to think about, okay, I know if I know I have this much rain, how much this area can take in, and what are the impacts? Well, what if I think about an even stronger storm? What will happen? So these kinds of anticipation and planning, this is what is important, because I think knowing what the type of weather that we're going to face is only one factor of the planning and the early warning systems and so on.
Listen, we're going to take a quick break. We'll come back. More of our conversation with the good professor at Vanderbilt about what can be done to try to prepare and prevent, hopefully, the loss of life that we saw in Humphreys County this past week. And we'll be back with more right after this. Stay with us.